You are standing on the ice-slick deck of a pirate vessel in the North Atlantic, December 1717, watching a man die from the inside out. His name was Thomas Caldwell, and 30 minutes ago, he fell through the gangway into the churning black waters below. Now, as his crewmates haul his convulsing body back aboard, you witness the horrifying reality of cold shock response as it tears through his nervous system. His breathing comes in violent, uncontrollable gasps that sound like a drowning man's death rattle. His skin has turned the color of old pewter, mottled with patches of blue-black that spread like ink stains across his flesh. The smell of urine mixes with the metallic tang of hypothermic blood as his body temperature plummets toward the point where human consciousness simply ceases to exist. What you are witnessing is not heroic adventure, but calculated biological warfare between human physiology and the merciless physics of heat transfer, where a single misstep meant certain death in waters cold enough to stop a man's heart in less than 15 minutes. This is the untold story of how pirates survived in freezing seas during the golden age of piracy, when death from hypothermia was as common as death from sword wounds, and the difference between life and death often came down to a few layers of stolen wool and the desperate knowledge passed down from one dying sailor to another. Tonight, we will examine the brutal medical realities of cold water survival, the ingenious but dangerous heating methods that turned wooden ships into floating death traps, and the systematic layering techniques that kept pirates alive long enough to plunder another day. We will explore how these maritime outlaws developed survival strategies that were equal parts brilliant and barbaric, revealing the savage lengths to which men will go when faced with the simple choice between warmth and death. Before diving into these forgotten stories of survival and suffering, if you enjoy learning about the hidden truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I find it incredible that we are exploring these ancient stories together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by our shared curiosity about the past. The physiological catastrophe that befell Thomas Caldwell was a textbook example of what modern medical science calls the cold shock response, a series of involuntary reflexes that killed more pirates than all the naval battles of the Golden Age combined. When human skin temperature drops below 60 degrees Fahrenheit, the sympathetic nervous system triggers a cascade of potentially lethal reactions within the first 30 seconds of immersion. The initial gasp reflex forces the victim to inhale up to 2.5 liters of air involuntarily, and if the head is submerged during this critical moment, drowning becomes inevitable as seawater floods the lungs. Blood pressure skyrockets as peripheral blood vessels constrict, forcing the heart to work 3 times harder while simultaneously reducing its oxygen supply, creating perfect conditions for cardiac arrhythmia or complete cardiac arrest. Captain Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard, lost 17 men during a single winter crossing from the Carolinas to the Bahamas in 1717, not to enemy fire, but to the systematic shutdown of human thermoregulation. The ship's surgeon, a former Royal Navy medical officer named Cornelius Harwell, documented the progression of hypothermia in his private journal with clinical precision that would have impressed modern emergency physicians. The men first complained of uncontrollable shivering that made handling the rigging impossible, Harwell wrote. Within 20 minutes of exposure to the spray, fine motor control disappeared entirely. The fingers became rigid claws that could not tie knots or grip weapons. Speech became slurred and confused, followed by aggressive behavior and paradoxical undressing as the hypothalamic temperature regulation center began to fail. The medical reality of severe hypothermia was far more grotesque than romantic pirate mythology suggests. As core body temperature dropped below 91 degrees Fahrenheit, the cerebral cortex began shutting down, causing hallucinations, violent mood swings, and the phenomenon known as paradoxical undressing, where victims would tear off their clothes in the final stages of freezing to death. Harwell documented cases where men would suddenly become convinced they were burning alive and would strip naked on deck, accelerating their death from exposure. The final stage, called terminal burrowing, drove dying pirates to crawl into small, enclosed spaces like animals seeking dens, often wedging themselves so tightly into ship crevices that their bodies could not be extracted until they thawed. The layering system that successful pirate crews developed was a sophisticated response to the brutal mathematics of heat transfer, based on empirical knowledge gained through watching countless comrades freeze to death. The foundation layer consisted of fine linen shirts that wicking moisture away from the skin, preventing the rapid heat loss that occurred when wet fabric came into direct contact with body temperature. Over this went wool underlayers, often stolen from captured merchant vessels or stripped from the bodies of defeated enemies. Wool retained approximately 60% of its insulating properties even when completely saturated, a characteristic that saved thousands of pirate lives during the winter months when dry clothing was a rare luxury. The middle layer was where pirates demonstrated their genius for improvisation and theft. Wealthy captains wore quilted doublets stuffed with duck down looted from aristocratic passengers, while common sailors made do with layers of coarse wool kersey and broadcloth that had been treated with whale oil or animal fat to improve water resistance. The notorious pirate Benjamin Hornigold was known to wear up to 7 different waistcoats simultaneously during winter voyages, each one stolen from a different prize and layered according to thickness and material composition. His crew called him the walking wardrobe, but Hornigold survived 16 years of piracy in northern waters, outliving most of his contemporaries who paid less attention to thermal management. The outer layer presented the greatest challenge, as it needed to protect against wind and water while remaining flexible enough to allow the complex movements required for shipboard combat and sail handling. Pirates favored thick leather jerkins that had been soaked in pine tar, creating a waterproof but flexible barrier that could turn aside both spray and cutlass blades. The tar treatment also made the garments highly flammable, adding another layer of danger to the already precarious existence of men who lived surrounded by open flames and gunpowder. More than one pirate met his end when a spark from the galley fire turned his tar-soaked clothing into a human torch. The systematic theft of quality cold weather gear became a primary objective during pirate raids, sometimes taking precedence over traditional treasure. When the pirate John Rackham captured a British naval frigate off the coast of Nova Scotia in January 1719, his first order was not to secure the ship's gold or weapons, but to strip every wool garment from the crew and passengers. The heavy naval greatcoats, lined with wool and equipped with deep pockets for hand warmers, were considered more valuable than Spanish silver in the frigid waters of the North Atlantic. Rackham's quartermaster noted that a single Royal Navy officer's wool cloak could be traded for the equivalent of 50 pounds sterling in the Caribbean markets. Headwear represented a critical component of pirate cold weather survival, as the human head loses up to 25% of total body heat through radiation and convection. The popular image of pirates wearing silk bandanas was largely a warm weather affectation. In cold climates, successful pirates wore close-fitting wool caps called thrums, made from the discarded ends of ship rope that were woven into a dense, water-resistant fabric. These caps were often worn under broader-brimmed hats that channeled rain and spray away from the face and neck, creating a 2-layer system that provided both insulation and weather protection. The infamous tricorn hat, when worn in cold weather, served a specific thermal purpose beyond its intimidating appearance. The 3-corner design created air pockets that trapped warm air close to the scalp, while the stiff brim acted as a shield against wind-driven spray. Pirates operating in northern waters often stuffed additional insulation into the crown of their hats, using everything from sheep's wool to human hair collected from defeated enemies. The macabre practice of scalping fallen foes was not always motivated by vengeance. Human hair provided excellent insulation and was readily available after battles. Footwear presented perhaps the greatest challenge for pirates operating in freezing conditions, as feet were simultaneously the most vulnerable to frostbite and the most essential for maintaining balance on ice-covered decks. Most pirates went barefoot during warm weather to maintain better grip on slippery surfaces, but winter sailing required protective footwear that balanced warmth with functionality. The solution was thick wool stockings worn inside leather boots that had been treated with animal fat to improve water resistance and flexibility. Pirates often wore multiple pairs of stockings, with the outer layer deliberately oversized to allow for air circulation and additional insulation material. The practice of stuffing boots with straw, rags, or scraps of fur was widespread among pirate crews, though it carried significant risks. Organic materials could freeze solid, creating rigid lumps that caused pressure sores and restricted circulation. Worse, wet organic matter became a breeding ground for bacteria and fungi that caused infections capable of spreading to the bone. The pirate surgeon Marcus Reed documented several cases of gangrene that required amputation of frostbitten toes that had become infected due to contaminated boot stuffing. The choice between warmth and disease was a constant gamble that many pirates lost. Hand protection required even more ingenious solutions, as pirates needed to maintain fine motor control for handling weapons, rigging, and navigation instruments while protecting their fingers for frostbite. The solution was a system of layered mittens and fingerless gloves that could be quickly removed when precision was required. The inner layer consisted of thin wool gloves that provided basic insulation, over which went leather mittens with removable finger sections that allowed access to trigger guards and sword hilts. Pirates often coated their hands with whale oil or seal fat before putting on gloves, creating an additional barrier against moisture and improving the flexibility of leather in cold conditions. The dietary strategies that pirates employed to generate internal heat were based on practical knowledge of metabolism and thermogenesis that predated scientific understanding by centuries. Spicy foods became crucial survival tools rather than mere flavor enhancers, as the capsaicin in hot peppers triggered vasodilation and increased blood flow to extremities. Pirates hoarded stocks of Caribbean peppers during tropical raids, rationing them carefully during winter voyages when the warming effect could mean the difference between functional hands and frostbitten stumps. Captain Charles Vane was known to consume such large quantities of hot peppers during cold weather that his crew called him Hellmouth for the steam that seemed to pour from his mouth in freezing air. Hardtack, the notorious ship's biscuit that formed the foundation of maritime diet, served a dual purpose as both sustenance and heat generation. The dense carbohydrate content required significant energy to digest, creating a thermogenic effect that warmed the body from within. Pirates learned to time their hardtack consumption to coincide with the coldest parts of the night watch, using the metabolic heat generated by digestion to maintain core body temperature during the most dangerous hours. The biscuits were often soaked in hot rum or tea, creating a warming porridge that provided both calories and immediate heat transfer to the digestive system. The relationship between alcohol and cold survival was more complex and dangerous than popular mythology suggests. While rum created an immediate sensation of warmth as it burned down the throat, alcohol actually accelerated heat loss by causing peripheral vasodilation, allowing precious body heat to escape through the skin. Experienced pirates understood this paradox and developed strict protocols for alcohol consumption during cold weather. Small amounts of rum were permitted only when combined with hot food or drink, never on an empty stomach, and never for men standing watch in exposed positions. The penalty for violating these rules was often death by hypothermia, making alcohol discipline a matter of crew survival rather than mere ship order. The preparation of hot beverages became a crucial survival skill that required balancing the need for warmth against the constant fire hazard present on wooden ships. Pirates developed portable brewing techniques using small metal containers that could be heated quickly and extinguished rapidly if danger threatened. Tea made from pine needles provided vitamin C to prevent scurvy while delivering essential heat to the core. Coffee, when available, was preferred for its caffeine content, which helped maintain alertness during long cold watches when falling asleep could mean death from exposure. Communal eating strategies evolved to maximize heat retention and shared warmth during mealtimes. Pirates gathered around large pots of stew or soup, using the rising steam to warm their faces and hands while consuming the hot contents. The practice of eating in shifts allowed men to warm themselves in the galley area, while others maintained essential ship operations. Meals were timed to provide maximum metabolic heat generation during the coldest portions of the 24-hour cycle, with the largest hot meal served just before the start of night watches. The engineering of heating systems aboard pirate vessels required solving the fundamental contradiction between the need for warmth and the catastrophic fire risk inherent in wooden ships. The basic heating apparatus was a brazier, a metal container filled with sand or stone that could hold burning charcoal or wood while containing sparks and providing a stable base on a moving deck. These braziers were constructed from whatever metal could be salvaged or stolen, often from captured ships' galley equipment or naval armaments. The most sophisticated braziers featured ventilation holes that could be adjusted to control airflow and heat output while minimizing smoke production that might reveal the ship's position to enemies. The placement of braziers within the ship required careful consideration of air circulation, structural integrity, and escape routes in case of fire. Most were positioned in the center of crew quarters, suspended from the overhead beams by chains that allowed the heating apparatus to remain level despite the ship's motion. The area around each brazier was cleared of flammable materials and often lined with metal sheeting salvaged from captured vessels. Sand buckets were positioned at regular intervals, and crew members were assigned specific fire watch duties on a rotating basis, understanding that a moment's inattention could result in the entire ship becoming a floating crematorium. The fuel for these heating systems presented its own challenges, as traditional firewood was heavy, took up valuable cargo space, and became waterlogged during storms. Pirates developed alternative fuel sources that were more practical for maritime use. Whale oil, when available, burned longer and hotter than wood while producing less smoke. Rendered animal fat from ship stores could be used in emergency situations, though it produced a nauseating odor that made the confined crew quarters nearly uninhabitable. Coal, when it could be obtained from merchant vessels, was preferred for its high heat output and relatively clean burning characteristics, though its weight made it impractical for smaller vessels. The most innovative heating solution employed by some pirate crews was the use of heated metal objects as portable warmers. Cannonballs were particularly effective for this purpose, as they could be heated in the galley fire and then wrapped in cloth to create radiating heat sources that lasted for hours. These improvised warmers were distributed among crew members standing watch, tucked into clothing, or placed in bedding to pre-warm sleeping areas. The technique required careful timing and thick wrapping materials to prevent burns, but it allowed heat to be distributed throughout the ship without the fire hazard of multiple open flames. Ship lanterns served a dual purpose during cold weather, providing essential light while generating modest amounts of heat that crew members could gather around during night watches. The whale oil or candle flames, while small, created enough warmth to allow pirates to thaw their hands sufficiently to handle weapons and rigging. Rotating duty around the lanterns became a formal part of watch schedules, with each crew member allowed a specific amount of time near the heat source before giving way to the next man. These brief warming periods were often the difference between maintaining fighting capability and succumbing to cold-induced incapacitation. The psychological aspects of staying warm were as important as the physical techniques, as mental state directly affected the body's ability to generate and retain heat. Pirates developed mental strategies to combat the despair and panic that often accompanied extreme cold exposure. Storytelling, singing, and gambling sessions served to distract the mind from physical discomfort while encouraging the social cooperation necessary for group survival. The shared experience of suffering created bonds among crew members that transcended the usual conflicts and rivalries of pirate life. Physical activity became the most immediate and effective method for generating heat when other warming techniques were unavailable or insufficient. Pirates understood that movement increased blood circulation and muscle-generated heat, leading to the development of specific exercises that could be performed in the confined spaces below deck. These included isometric exercises where muscles were tensed against immovable objects, calisthenics adapted for low ceiling spaces, and competitive physical challenges that generated heat through exertion while maintaining morale through friendly competition. Rope climbing and rigging work, normally considered dangerous punishment duty, became sought-after assignments during cold weather because of the intense physical exertion required. The act of climbing to the tops of masts and working with the complex sailing apparatus generated enough body heat to keep pirates warm for hours after returning to deck level. Captains learned to rotate these physically demanding tasks among crew members, using the need for warmth as motivation for maintaining the ship, while keeping their men from freezing to death. Dancing and organized group activities served both social and survival functions during the longest cold spells. Traditional sailors' dances like the hornpipe were physically demanding enough to generate significant body heat while requiring minimal space. These activities were often scheduled during the coldest portions of the night watch, providing both entertainment and essential warmth. The stamping and jumping movements associated with these dances created enough heat that participants would often be sweating despite sub-freezing temperatures. Combat training and weapons practice took on new importance during cold weather voyages, not just for maintaining fighting skills, but for the life-saving heat generated by vigorous exercise. Sword practice, wrestling matches, and boxing competitions became regular features of daily life during winter sailing. These activities served multiple purposes: maintaining combat readiness, generating essential body heat, settling disputes through controlled violence, and providing entertainment during the long, dark hours of winter sailing. The physical exertion was often intense enough that participants needed to remove outer layers of clothing despite freezing air temperatures. Group sleeping arrangements evolved into sophisticated heat-sharing systems that maximized the warmth generated by multiple bodies while maintaining the vigilance necessary for ship security. Pirates developed the sandwich sleeping method, where men would arrange themselves in carefully planned patterns that shared body heat while allowing quick access to weapons if the ship came under attack. The warmest positions in the center of these human bundles were rotated among crew members based on seniority, recent watch duty, and physical condition. The huddle formation, borrowed from military survival techniques, became a standard practice for pirates caught in extreme weather conditions. Groups of 6 to 8 men would press together, sharing body heat while rotating positions to ensure that no individual bore the brunt of cold exposure for extended periods. This technique could raise the effective temperature within the group by 15 to 20 degrees, often making the difference between survival and death during the worst weather. The physical intimacy required for effective huddling challenged traditional notions of personal space and masculine independence, but survival trumped social conventions when death from exposure was the alternative. Shared bedding systems using stolen or improvised materials created warm microclimates within the generally frigid crew quarters. Pirates would combine individual blankets, clothing, and any available fabric to create communal sleeping areas that trapped and concentrated body heat. Furs and heavy fabrics looted from passenger vessels were particularly prized for their insulation properties. These shared sleeping arrangements required cooperation and trust among men who were often competitors for resources and advancement, creating unusual bonds within pirate crews. The seasonal migration patterns of successful pirate crews demonstrated sophisticated understanding of weather patterns and ocean temperatures that rivaled the knowledge of trained navigators. Most experienced captains planned their sailing routes to follow warm currents and avoid the worst winter weather, timing their movements to stay ahead of seasonal temperature drops. This required detailed knowledge of wind patterns, ocean currents, and regional climate variations that was passed down through generations of seafaring men. The Caribbean became a winter refuge for pirates operating in northern waters, with crews timing their southern migration to arrive in tropical waters before the worst winter weather struck the North Atlantic. This pattern created a seasonal concentration of pirate activity in warm water ports during the winter months, leading to increased competition for resources and frequent conflicts between crews competing for the same safe harbors. Port Royal, Tortuga, and other pirate-friendly locations became overcrowded during winter months as northern crews sought warmth and safety. Strategic port selection during cold weather involved more than just finding warm climates. Pirates needed harbors that offered protection from winter storms, access to fuel and food supplies, and friendly or corruptible local authorities. The most successful winter ports were often small fishing villages or remote islands where pirates could establish temporary bases without attracting naval attention. These locations provided opportunities to repair ship damage caused by winter sailing while allowing crews to recover from the physical stress of cold weather operations. The timing of raids and military operations was carefully coordinated with weather patterns to maximize the advantages of cold-adapted crews while minimizing exposure to the worst conditions. Pirates learned that merchant vessels and naval patrols were less active during severe weather, creating opportunities for surprise attacks by crews that had mastered cold weather sailing techniques. The ability to operate effectively in conditions that grounded other ships became a significant tactical advantage for well-prepared pirate crews. Cold weather clothing captured during raids was often more valuable than traditional treasure, leading to the development of specialized techniques for preserving and distributing winter gear among crew members. Ship's quartermasters became expert at evaluating the quality and utility of captured clothing, understanding which materials and construction methods provided the best protection against cold and wet conditions. The distribution of cold weather gear became a matter of crew survival that required balancing individual needs against overall ship effectiveness. The modification and repair of cold weather clothing became essential skills for pirates operating in northern waters. Crews learned to combine different garments to create more effective layering systems, using materials like tar, animal fat, and plant fibers to improve water resistance and insulation properties. These modifications often made the difference between survival and death during extended cold weather sailing, turning ordinary clothing into sophisticated survival equipment through knowledge gained from harsh experience. Medical knowledge of cold-related injuries and their treatment became crucial survival information that was passed down through pirate crews like precious treasure. Ship surgeons and experienced sailors developed practical techniques for treating frostbite, hypothermia, and other cold-related medical problems using whatever materials were available aboard ship. This knowledge often meant the difference between losing crew members to preventable cold injuries and maintaining a functional fighting force throughout winter operations. The treatment of frostbite required understanding the delicate balance between rewarming damaged tissue and preventing further injury through improper treatment. Pirates learned that rapid rewarming could cause more damage than gradual temperature increase, developing techniques for slowly restoring circulation to frostbitten extremities. The most common treatment involves soaking affected areas in progressively warmer water while massaging to restore blood flow. Those severe cases often resulted in amputation performed by ship surgeons using woodworking tools and sailing needles. Recognition of hypothermia symptoms allowed experienced crew members to intervene before cold exposure became fatal. Pirates learned to watch for the progressive signs of heat loss. Uncontrollable shivering, confusion, slurred speech, aggressive behavior, and the paradoxical undressing that marked the final stages of hypothermia. Early intervention techniques included forcing warm liquids down the throats of affected men, surrounding them with heated objects and warm bodies, and gradually increasing their core temperature through controlled heat application. The social dynamics of survival during extreme cold created unique bonds and conflicts within pirate crews. The shared suffering of cold weather sailing broke down some traditional hierarchies while creating new forms of dependence and cooperation. Men who might have been enemies in warmer conditions learned to depend on each other for survival, sharing body heat, food, and warm clothing in ways that challenged usual notions of individual self-reliance and masculine independence. Resource allocation during cold weather became a matter of life and death that required careful balancing of individual needs against overall crew survival. Captains and quartermasters had to make difficult decisions about distributing limited supplies of warm clothing, fuel, and heating equipment while maintaining crew morale and fighting effectiveness. These decisions often determined which crew members survived cold weather sailing and which became casualties of exposure and hypothermia. The development of cold weather sailing techniques created a specialized form of seamanship that distinguished successful northern pirates from their warm water counterparts. These skills included understanding how cold affected rope and sail handling, recognizing dangerous ice conditions, managing the increased fire hazards created by heating systems, and maintaining ship operations when crew efficiency was reduced by cold weather clothing and equipment. Navigation in cold conditions required specialized knowledge of how weather affected compass readings, chart accuracy, and celestial observations. Pirates learned that extreme cold could affect the accuracy of navigation instruments, and that ice formation could create dangerous obstacles that were not marked on existing charts. The ability to navigate safely in cold conditions often determined whether crews reached warm water refuges or became trapped in dangerous northern waters during winter storms. Ship maintenance in cold conditions became more critical and more difficult as wooden hulls became more brittle and rigging grew stiff and potentially dangerous. Pirates developed techniques for maintaining their vessels in cold conditions, understanding which repairs could be delayed and which required immediate attention despite dangerous working conditions. The failure to properly maintain ships during cold weather sailing often resulted in catastrophic damage that could sink vessels or leave crews stranded in hostile waters. The legacy of pirate cold weather survival techniques extended far beyond the golden age of piracy, influencing maritime practices and survival knowledge that remained relevant for centuries. Many of the layering techniques, heating methods, and group survival strategies developed by pirates were adopted by naval forces, merchant sailors, and Arctic explorers who faced similar challenges in cold water environments. The practical knowledge gained through life and death experience in the world's coldest seas became part of the broader tradition of maritime survival wisdom. The psychological resilience developed by pirates who survived multiple cold weather voyages created a unique form of mental toughness that set them apart from other sailors. The experience of surviving extreme cold while maintaining the alertness and aggression necessary for piracy required exceptional mental discipline and emotional control. This psychological conditioning often determined which pirates achieved long-term success and which became casualties of the harsh conditions that defined life at sea during the golden age of piracy. Modern survival science validates many of the techniques developed by pirates through practical experience, confirming that their layering systems, group warming methods, and heat generation strategies were based on sound physiological principles. The sophisticated understanding of hypothermia, heat transfer, and cold water survival demonstrated by successful pirate crews often exceeded the knowledge available to contemporary military and medical authorities, representing hard-won wisdom gained through direct confrontation with the deadliest conditions on Earth. As we return to that ice-covered deck where Thomas Caldwell fought for his life against the inexorable physics of heat loss, we can see his tragedy with new understanding. The convulsions that racked his body were not random suffering, but the systematic shutdown of biological systems that had kept humans alive for millennia. The blue-black discoloration spreading across his skin marked the retreat of blood from his extremities as his body fought to preserve core temperature and brain function. The smell of urine that mingled with the sea spray was evidence of the autonomic nervous system's failure as hypothermia overwhelmed his body's ability to maintain basic functions. But Caldwell's story was not meaningless. His crew's response to his cold water immersion demonstrated the hard-won survival knowledge that separated living pirates from dead ones. They did not attempt to warm him rapidly, understanding that sudden heat application could cause cardiac arrest in hypothermic victims. Instead, they removed his wet clothing, wrapped him in dry wool blankets, and gradually raised his core temperature using heated cannonballs and shared body heat. They forced warm rum mixed with honey down his throat in small amounts, providing calories and internal heat without overwhelming his compromised digestive system. The techniques that saved Caldwell's life were not learned from books or formal training, but from watching other men die from cold exposure and understanding what interventions worked and which proved fatal. This knowledge was purchased with the lives of countless pirates who served as unwilling test subjects in the brutal laboratory of cold water survival. Each successful rescue added to the collective wisdom that helped subsequent generations of seafaring men survive the deadly embrace of freezing seas. The transformation of pirate crews from collections of individual criminals into sophisticated survival organizations was forged in the crucible of shared suffering in the world's coldest waters. The bonds created by huddling together for warmth, sharing scarce heating fuel, and depending on each other for life itself created loyalties that transcended the usual motivations of greed and violence. These relationships, born of necessity and strengthened by mutual dependence, often became the foundation for the most successful and longest-lasting pirate crews. Today, when we see maritime survival equipment with its high-tech fabrics, emergency beacons, and scientifically designed thermal protection, we are witnessing the culmination of knowledge that began with pirates like Caldwell learning to survive in conditions that killed the unprepared with ruthless efficiency. Their legacy lives on in every maritime survival manual, in every layering system used by cold water sailors, and in every group survival technique employed by modern military and civilian survival specialists. The story of how pirates survived freezing cold seas is ultimately a testament to human adaptability and the lengths to which people will go to preserve life in the face of seemingly impossible odds. These men, operating outside the law and beyond the protection of civilized society, developed survival techniques that were more sophisticated and effective than anything available to legitimate sailors of their era. Their success was measured not in treasure acquired, but in mornings when they woke up alive, having survived another night in the endless battle between human physiology and the deadly mathematics of heat transfer. In the end, the greatest treasure that pirates could acquire was not gold or silver, but the knowledge of how to stay alive when the sea turned cold and merciless. This wisdom, written in the scars of frostbite and the memories of countless cold nights, represents one of humanity's most hard-won victories over the natural forces that have claimed the lives of seafaring men since the first human ventured onto the open ocean. The techniques they developed continue to save lives today, a lasting legacy for men who live beyond the reach of law, but not beyond the reach of death.